Welcome to Adulting Initiative. So basically, the whole goal of this is to talk about how, just walk into like a mindset that we are all basically moving into adulting. I mean, some of us are like in a space where we're like already adults, but like we're kind of moving into that. And so the only reason why I'm speaking now is because Dunks came up to me and he was like, Jeff, I'm old and I need you to come and speak. So I'm here. So what we're going to be doing is we're just going to be going through like a cool discussion and kind of discussion template. We have Msizi over here and we have Duncan over here, and they're just going to be having a conversation, and we're basically just going to be listening to the conversation, kind of like a podcast style but live audience kind of vibe. And so that kind of mentality. So Duncan said I should be speaking for 10 minutes, so I'm just going to carry on talking, and then...
I don't think I said 10.
You said 10 minutes.
I think I said
but
5.
I'll introduce like Msizi and Duncan. So I'm going to start off with Duncan, and I think having him talk with Msizi is like a really good fit. The reason why is we're kind of walking into this mindset of like Duncan described it as like the slash kind of lifestyle. And so that basically meaning like you walk into life and you actually aren't just doing one thing with your life. So you're not going into a profession and you're just sticking with that profession. You could do one profession and move into doing something else. Like, for example, Chris, he's a videographer, but he actually dabbles in so much more outside of that. Videography, graphic design, sound design, animation, that kind of stuff. So he's Chris / videographer / sound designer / entrepreneur / and then we have, so the reason why I say Duncan's a good person to be chatting to Msizi is just because of where he's at in his circle. So if you know Duncan is that he is one of the leaders of the church, but the one thing I really like about him is that in his own sphere, he has his own slashes. So he's not just a lead pastor or one of the head pastors. He is also a singer, drummer. He's really good at video production, post-production, sound engineering. He's really good at a whole bunch of stuff. He's there in his hands and feet, but also he's also preaching on a Sunday. So, you kind of get that. And then I want to introduce Msizi, who's also just kind of in that kind of line of, that's kind of sphere work, where he's a radio presenter, currently was at, 5FM, and he just said that I don't know if you know, he has a coffee store called From Ground Up, and now he's opening 4 more, which is crazy. Kind of moving into that, like radio presenter / entrepreneur / singer. I heard him saying that he was on Idols way back, like... kind of saying that, and so like the whole discussion is, I think it probably will lean a lot towards that. I don't actually know what Duncan's going to be asking, but I think it's going to be leaning towards that whole idea that you don't actually have to be stuck with one specific thing. You have the capability to branch into so many spheres of life. For example, like someone Grant introduced me to, I can't remember his name, but he's actually a full-time doctor, but also a YouTuber. And he actually makes more money from YouTubing than being a doctor, which is crazy. All of his online revenue. And so that kind of mindset, though, you don't actually need to feel like you're stuck doing one specific thing. You can move into so many spheres of life and kind of get into that. And so I think that's probably one of the avenues they're going to be speaking about, and then moving forward into that. But I'm going to hand it over to Duncan and Msizi.
Give Jeff a hand. I love hearing Jeff speak, and I did ask him because he's younger, because I'm turning 30 this year, which I know doesn't sound old, but the thing is, I'm married and I have 2 kids, so immediately it makes me like 10 years older in like most people's circles. And I really am so glad that you are all here. Thank you so much for being here. You're in the room because we consider you and you consider yourself young adults. And I think it's such an interesting space when you're talking about those who are 20s, 30s, those who are on the front end of forging careers, those who are studying, those who are post-studies, those who are re-looking at how do we do this thing called life? How do we balance it all? How do we work it all? How do we not go down a road? How do we learn from generations that have gone before who have ran into walls? How do we, go after all these different things with all the energy we have, but not, run into a wall and be burnt out? How do we actually find the balance of our desire and our passion and also needing some food on the table? And so, how do you balance these whole things? And so I'm really keen to chat to Msizi. I think he kind of lives all of this and has lived a lot of this. And we'll get into some of that balance and some of that question. And I really want to start out. Jeff kind of gave us a little bit of background, but Msizi, why don't you give us, if someone didn't know who you are, didn't know all about Msizi James, give us the snapshot and kind of where you're at right now.
I think if you don't know me, you're very lucky. I'll start off with that. But it's so funny you saying that we're all going into adulting. It's so strange. I still never consider I'm not just a bit younger than you, slightly younger than you, and I still don't consider myself an adult. On many occasions, when somebody looks for an adult, I also look for one. You know what I'm saying? Like, if they say, is there any adults in the room? I also look. I don't know where the old people are. You know, I call my mom for advice still. But you're absolutely right. We're at that age now where we have to take a lot of responsibility for ourselves. So, firstly, hello everyone. How you guys doing? Cool, thank you. At least he's doing well. Everyone else is okay. They don't know why they're here. For those who don't know who I am, which I'm assuming is 99% of you, except for maybe you, I'm Msizi James. I'm a radio and television presenter, currently working at 5FM. I do the morning show right there. You probably know the persons on radio before me, Roger Good, and then it's me, and then other famous people. You know, they just threw me there for spice. And then I also am on TV. I used to host a game show up until last year on Mnet, before that on ETV. I used to host RGB on SABC One. So I've just, been in the entertainment industry for a while. I started off about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago in Durban. I'm from Durban, born and bred. Only moved up to this crazy city of yours when 2017, when DJ Fresh left 5FM. They needed somebody to replace that show, and then they called me up from Durban. Horrible mistake on their side. You know, they're like, who can we get that's like DJ Fresh but worse and costs much, much less? And then they called me up, you know. But it's been an absolute blessing being in Johannesburg. Then I've also dabbled into some business stuff, you know. Started off by owning a marketing and eventing company back in Durban that we brought up here. Then got into coffee, Beethoven Coffee. Then that was my first step. We used to serve coffee here actually at a stage. And then started my own coffee shop, which is literally down the road. So none of you have any excuse.
Like 2 roads away.
Literally down on this road, down there. So please come visit us sometimes. You see, my English, I'm telling you. It sometimes runs out, you know, especially at this time of night. I have my quota of English words for the day, then I say colonel instead of colonel all of a sudden. But please come visit us. You have no excuse. I would say the coffee's on me, but no, it's on you guys when you get there. Please support small business. But so working on opening up another 4 in this month, you know, huge blessing, which came out of nowhere. Then other small little businesses that we're involved with. I own an app. But in a nutshell, that's who I am. That's what I do. I also own dogs. That's also my pride and joy. You know, I have a couple of dogs, which today, by the way, found out are going to cost. I'm trying to give them. So if anyone's looking for a dog, I've got one to give back to dog owners, you know. Found out my dog is going through the most. And it's going to cost me a lot. So I'm willing to give it back. You know what I'm saying? It's a pug. Yeah, so if somebody's looking for a farty dog...
Dude, that's a rat. That's not a dog.
I'm going to plug in a Boston. Oh, here we go. I'm so glad she's not here.
But the real question, this is an adulting question for everyone. Do you have pet insurance?
I do. That was the first thing I got because...
But is it legit pet insurance? Because also then they hit you with all the T's and C's.
MediPet.
Okay, well, I'm just like...
Yeah, it's a legit one. Yeah, she says yes, it is a good one. No, it's a good one. No.
Clearly, Brian knows. Brian is like the key on this. If you have any questions, go ask him.
Ooh, is that a dog on your notebook?
I got it.
Yeah.
See?
So that's who I am. For those who are wondering why I would ever be sitting here in front of you guys, that's who I am. And thank you guys for having me in your church, man. It's a pleasure.
Lekker. We're so glad that you are here. So let's jump in. So you gave us a bit of a background in terms of you know, getting into the entertainment space, media industry. I know some guys will be, you know, it doesn't matter what career path you see ahead of you, what sphere of study you're in, whatever it looks like. Maybe chat to us. So you spoke about coming up from Durbs, coming to Joburg, kind of getting into all these kind of things. What do you think is the key, or what do you think are some of the most important things in almost realizing, hey, I've got a career path to go with. I kind of see it in my head in the future. There's probably going to be obstacles. There's probably going to be ways that we need to adapt and pivot. What are some tips for people on the front end of that? Because I think there'll be a lot of people in this room who are in that space saying, you know, I've got this dream, I've got this desire, I want to get into that space, that industry. This is what I want it to look like 10 years down the line. What do you think is some of the things they should be focused on, and maybe some of the things they should just,
100%. I've always said, like, our passions don't have to necessarily be our job. This idea that if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life is nonsense, absolute nonsense, Often work kills your passion, So somebody like me, I was never meant to be on radio. I had no interest on being on radio. It happened accidentally, really. I always thought I was going to be a singer, So the whole Idols thing is real. I was on Idols in 2012, I was number 17, and it was great. I thought I was going to be this big famous singer. I mean, I grew up in my church back in Durban, City Hill it's now called, and I was a worship leader there, from Sunday school to youth to even the main church, and I was like, this is what I'm called to do. I used to sing with the orchestra in Durban, and I thought that was my calling. I dropped out of university, I was studying law, and I was like, no. No one needs the law. I will just sing for my supper. But it turns out that was my plan, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I hadn't consulted God on that plan at all. That was me making my own plans for my life. It turns out, no, that was not what I was meant to do. He had greater plans that were going to exceed that. So this thing of me chasing this singing goal and singing at a wedding for 1,000 rand or going to this bar or pub to go sing there was all my plan. And I look back and was like, where was it going to take me? I was never going to be like, there's a dime a dozen great singers. And I was never going to be Justin Bieber. So why was I doing that? But I think once I started praying deeply about what my actual purpose was, that was revealed to me. And I think if I just go a couple of steps back, I remember I was telling this story a couple of days ago. It's just to somebody that when I was younger, we had family friends who also ran a church in Cape Town. And one day, I was probably 10, 9. The pastor, his name was John, he decided that he was going to prophesy over me. And he gave me this prophecy, which at the time I was like, that makes no sense. I have no interest in politics. So he said to me, the Lord is telling me that you're going to be a leader and you're going to speak to millions of people. So I was like, thank goodness, I'm going to be a mega church pastor. I'm going to have a jet. It's going to be great. I'm going to have a Rolls Royce. But no, many years later, that prophecy came true in a completely different way.
Yeah.
I am a thought leader. I am on radio, the biggest radio station in the country, speaking to millions of people on a daily basis. So that you're going to lead people was never a matter of you're going to be a politician or a pastor. That was my plan. At stage, I was like, okay, maybe I'll go into politics. Maybe I become the mayor of this town. But no, I think the more time that I spent praying, because when I got hired on radio, I was working I was teaching kids how to surf at a summer camp in Durban. So when that all happened, it come at a stage where I'd just come back from living a year in Cape Town, and I was confused. I was like, God, I am now 21, 22. I don't know what I'm going to do next. Like, I need to get serious. This was cool when I was 19, surfing every day. But now I need to get serious. And I was crying out or calling out saying, God, show me what's next. I have no qualifications. I dropped out of school. What is next? And I kid you not, radio fell into my lap in a way that it shouldn't have. But that was his calling for me. Closing the doors into idols and no longer becoming a singer, whatever it may be, was all my plans, which he shut to shatter my life, to just give me plans that were 10 times greater than what I ever thought.
It's a hard journey, though.
It is.
When everything's falling apart. And
Absolutely.
I've asked this a question because I've had this conversation with quite a few people. And if you guys along the way, just a note, if you've got questions, log them, because we're going to have a bit of a question time that Jeff will lead us in at the end. So if there's something like pops into your head and you really want to ask it, please log it. But I've been asking this question because we've been talking a lot about this idea of like pursuing passions and really understanding, and from Christian perspective, how do you actually go about that journey of discovering your purpose within God's plan? Because so often we dictate it to God, or we dictate it in our thought and how we should go and be like, hey, God, please bless this. Can you just high five this idea? Because I think it's great. But this whole idea of pursuing passion and trying to do that in a realistic way, but also in a way that's pleasing to God and His will and what He's wanting for us. So often you're in that space where there's a dream, something, whatever it might be. How do you know, first of all, if that dream is placed there by God or placed there by you? And then the second question I have is there a moment when you're in that space where maybe it looks like it's all shattered? Is there a moment where the dream needs to die? Or is there a moment where it's like, actually, God's going to build on this and take it into a different direction?
I would say, let's go back to the first question. How do you know the dream is yours or not God's? I guess it goes back to the idea of doors opening and closing. things not working out in that certain thing that you think is meant for you, that you think is meant for you. In my example, once again, we go back to singing. Things just were not working out. Doors were closing. I was not being accepted to this or that, you know what I'm saying? And that was me making those plans. That wasn't me with praying and going, God, should I do this? And then him saying, yes, go do it. And then closing, And I think that's the way I distinguish it. And when do you know when to give up? I always say to people, once again, your passion doesn't need to become your job. For me, I didn't stop singing. I still loved it. So I was part, even here at FCC, I was part of the worship team. I'm part of the band. I have a couple songs on radio. So I did it as a side thing because I acknowledged that was a blessing from him, the ability to sing. If your ability is to draw or be a graphic designer, that's definitely a blessing that he's given you. But perhaps it's not meant you're calling for a living. You know what I'm saying? So maybe that's meant to be your passion and what you do, but maybe as a service more than a means to making money. So it is very hard, and I guess I was lucky enough or fortunate enough that it was revealed to me quite early. And the doors, I didn't spend my whole life thinking I was going to become the next big rock star. I didn't sit for 5 years gigging at different pubs in hopes that one day Simon Cowell will walk in, you know what I'm saying? It happened quite early. So I was really fortunate in that sense. But yeah, that's what I can say. I think you just need to keep praying and then watching what doors open and close, Because I do not think that God gives us blessings or certain talents just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
I think we're definitely meant to use them for what is up to him.
I think that's the thing. I think that's the key that you're really hitting on is like this idea of like how much are we taking to God first versus on the back end. And, even you saying like, well, in the midst of it, and like you're speaking a lot about praying as being kind of that kind of conversation you're having with God. And it seems like that's something that's super important to you on the ongoing basis. What does that prayer, that conversation, what does that actually look like day to day in decision making, in doors closing, doors opening? Because I think sometimes some people hear it and they don't quite understand. They're like, oh, okay, cool. Is it like it's just the 5 minutes a day where I'm having a chat with God and seeing what He says? Is it how is God speaking back? How are you starting to see that conversation happen and getting that stuff to grow?
Yeah, I think it's basic. I'm not spending hours and hours in devotion and prayer. Not every day, obviously, but for me, it's definitely a matter of, Lord, let your will be done. Like even with this new deal that we're going through now with the coffee shops and the 4 new ones, it's like that is a hectic thing to take on. We are a new company. Lord, if this be your will, let things happen the way that they meant to fall into place. And if things start not working out, it's obviously not His will, it's my will for it to be done. And I don't see that succeeding then, but I think it's definitely a matter of just, even within the moment of being there, just asking for some clarity, asking for signs that this is the right thing for you to be doing. That's what I do.
I think we started to speak about this before, and so I'll take us into the conversation. You're a Christian. You're following Jesus, but you're doing it not necessarily in spaces that work in the same way. And so I think there's also this idea like we understand that when you have a value system that is based on God, His word, His way, that relationship you have with Him, but then you're working with people or in spaces where maybe that's not always going to play nice. How have you experienced it being in media and entertainment where you potentially could compromise on that value system, but really had to walk out a road to say, actually, this is not where I'm going to go? Like, how has that balance played for you? How have you crossed those wires?
So Radio 101, don't speak about money, politics, and religion. If anyone's ever heard me on radio, every show I touch on one of those things, you know what I'm saying? So I think from the beginning, I've never been shy about who I am, what I stand for, what I believe. I think even going back to the days when I was doing Drive at 5FM a couple years ago, it was very well known that I went to FCC and we'd even have Pastor Tony on every now and then, for some banter. Because I'm not a Bible basher, I don't go on air and say, turn or burn, how there's no fire escapes, but I made it very well known that I am a Christian. So I've never hid that from people. So I've never had to pretend that I'm something I'm not. I've never been in positions where now I've got to prove myself, because not only my colleagues, but my listeners have built that rapport to know, this is who Msizi is. This is what his values are, what he stands for. And I'm not naive. I'm not super religious on radio. I'm well known on radio for speaking my mind. I just say what it is, whatever it may be. So for me, it's definitely never been an issue. I can imagine why it would be an issue for a lot of people, but that's because people set themselves up to be things that they aren't. On radio especially, I've done a great job of acknowledging my faults in the past, from where I went wrong to, because how people get exposed every day now on social media. You can't expose me. I'm the one who told you, You can't go on Twitter one day and say, Msizi once stole when he was in school. I'm the one who said that story. I told everyone we'll pull the records, So so going back to my religion, I've been very open and honest about the fact that I am a Christian. I did go to Four Ways Community Church when I lived here in Four Ways, so that's been a running theme throughout my whole, even when I've had issues with the church in the sense that I'm not okay with what's going on in certain churches, I have been very open about that. I never hide things just because I'm all about openness and transparency, and I think that's what's built great rapport with me and my listeners. I'm also very well aware of the fact that I am in this world, but not of the world, as cheesy as that sounds. I'm a DJ. I hang out at nightclubs. But it's like I'm not a prude, but at the same time, you're not going to ever catch me wasted at a nightclub. You know what I'm saying? So when I DJ, get there an hour ahead, have a couple of drinks, play, leave an hour later. I'm not the DJ who's there from 6 o'clock to 6 a.m. in the morning. But I think also the people I surround myself with outside of work and outside of industry are so aligned with me and what I believe that they keep me grounded too. So my best friend Toby, who's been my best friend for years, he is also like one of my mentors as far as my faith, my walk in faith has been. And he's the same guy who will go to the club with me when I'm DJing. He'll carry my bags around, you know what I'm saying? So it's just like having that core group of people around you too is so important in my industry, because you can be influenced by horrible things. You see them happening all around you, and they are mad tempting. When you're sitting at Rockets in Bryanston, you're watching everyone popping bottles and having the time of their life, it is incredibly tempting to be in that situation. But I think your core values, and I'm so lucky that not only was I brought up in a Christian household, so my core beliefs and my morals and values, not to say that you can only be Christian and have morals and values, but I was taught a certain style, a certain way of things, I did grow up in a mad strict household. I'm also very honest and open about my past. I always say, when speaking to people at church or elsewhere or otherwise, I went through a crazy time of my life. I think 2014, 2015, when I was working at the summer camp, man, there was a term called Msizi James wasted. I went through the most, where I was just living my best life, as they say. I didn't care. I straight off to straight and narrow. I think it went back to growing up in a strict household. So, I was going to church like 4 times a week. And then I got out of home and I was like, I'm free. I'm free. Now I'm going to show you how to drink, all of you. And so I'm honest about that part of my life, about finding God again and finding the church again and how I went about that. But so I think while it's incredibly hard to be, because like you say, the line of work I do, especially in the entertainment side, does not align itself on many occasions with my faith. But it's like, you've got to align yourself, man. Once again, as cheesy as it sounds, I am in that world, but I know that I'm not of that world. You know what I'm saying? So I don't need to dictate what I do.
Yeah. And I think you're touching on what's obviously so important in like the sense that we don't live this thing as an island. We don't live this thing isolated. And so that community, that tribe around you is going to be so important in not just being there for the good, but also realizing like actually we're keeping each other
in check.
Do you think that, where do you think the limit is in terms of that tribe, and does it change for different people? Do you think like for some people, they're actually only going to need that 1 or 2 friends that are that close and have that space? And do you think it matters if we actually... Do you think it actually needs to be a conversation of like actually very open, this is who we are going to be for each other? Or do you think it's actually the more organic thing and then this actually comes into it?
I think it can start off organically, but I think as you grow up as people, you need to have those type of conversations, especially as guys, especially as men, man. We need to have those conversations with our friends about holding each other accountable. This is where we draw the line with this, even when it comes to just conversations that we're having, the jokes that we tell. Because we can often, especially as guys, get carried away with the way that we talk or behave, that it is incredibly important that once you've found your tribe or your group of people, your people as we say, you need to have those conversations. So I'm not saying when you first meet somebody, you sit down and say, what are your values? How are you going to change my life? How are you going to hold me accountable? No. So you make friends, whatever, but as soon as you decided, okay, these are the people who I want to be a close part of my life and in my close-knit circle, then you do need to have those conversations. Many things, and that's one of my pet peeves, is that many things are left unsaid and expected of you. So be it in the church situation or elsewhere, even outside, I think there needs to be so much more communication around issues. And that's one of the things, with your circle of people. Just communicate. I can't expect you to, you can't expect me to hold you accountable when we've never had that conversation. And it's like, accountable on what? I don't know what you want me to hold you accountable on, So I definitely think it's a conversation that happens once you've found your people. And you'll naturally gravitate to a certain type of person or group of people. And that goes back to your core beliefs and core morals and values.
This is a question, and it's coming from me as now kind of a church leader in that space. Where do you, and I'll be careful how I ask this question. In your view, having had kind of the history of growing up in church, super hardcore, kind of strict setting, kind of getting, and there's I'm a cradle Christian too, have the same experience. You have, and there's pros and cons to it. There's the cons of it becomes routine, it's dry, you don't have the relationship side, and so you have to cross over into this thing's personal, this thing's real.
100%.
But it does give you a grounding that those who maybe don't grow up in a household or a family like that don't necessarily have.
Exactly.
For them, suddenly all this stuff in church, in God's word, in his church, and all of that stuff suddenly new. And so there's pros to that, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
The
radical change is a big pro there.
We did our bad stuff knowing better.
Yeah.
That's always what I said. That's how we go. With all that context, with all that you've seen, as you look at the church, and I'm not talking just about a specific church right now.
This one here.
I'm not talking about that. But as the Christian church at large.
Yeah.
Where do you think we failed young people?
I will say, because we're speaking openly and plainly, I think that the church failed young people in adapting. There was no adapting to the reality of where we are as people now, and that doesn't mean compromising on our values and our core beliefs and our religious beliefs. It's just the adapting, the support, and then instead of condemnation, loving people. I felt a lot from church that their role was very much the condemnation. We are here to keep you accountable by condemning you and here to discipline you, but very rarely are churches just outpouring love. The leaders in church, which I've experienced, unfortunately, way too many times, and that's not a specific church, it's just in general, so from so many churches, is the lack of leaders loving. It has always been my leaders are there to have a meeting with me or coffee with me when they think I've done something wrong or I'm going astray. There's never been a time where my leaders are calling me just to, how are you doing? Kudos on that, Just to remind you, we dig you, bro. You know what I'm saying? The only time, and I think that's a big systematic failure in general. I see that on radio too, how our managers will only ever contact us just to condemn us, in other words, instead of to not praise us, but to shower us in love. So I think the church has failed in many ways to really, just love people more the way that they're meant to, I've unfortunately experienced it more as a place of, this place is here to keep you morally in check. And that makes it much more intimidating than it needs to be, should I say. I think young people living in the year 2021 maybe are afraid to venture into new churches without feeling either judged for what they did in the past or currently doing. And instead of adapting and loving people. We're still like in the olden day churches of, yo, we need to whip you for doing that. You know what I'm saying? And once again, this is not pointed at any specific church. It's just what I felt as far as failure. And that's just because you asked that question. It doesn't mean that I think churches are horrible. It's where did they fail? That's where I think they failed. I think they do a world of good. You know, I think churches are incredibly important, and I think church itself is incredibly important. And I'm not talking about the building. I'm talking, of course, about the people there.
Yeah.
But I think if I can point out any failure, it's that, man, I just feel like leaders in church especially fail to love their people.
Yeah.
And it's like they're put on this pedestal where it's the church of such and such, and you are the end all and be all of this thing, where it's like the church is not about that person at all, you know? It's about Jesus, man, and it's like so many churches have put their pastors on this weird pedestal, which is so strange. I look at them, it's like, this is the corniest thing I've ever seen. It's so bizarre. What is going on? But yeah, that's just the one thing where I'm like, doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah. No, I definitely think it's... The difficult thing in church is it is one of those things like any other thing in society where it's so top down. And so often I think this is where church is realizing that they're getting it wrong is, and I don't want to throw everyone under the bus. I think every generation, you have the older generation not understanding the younger generation. And then possibly because of that misunderstanding, failing that generation in some way, shape or form. Like, you go to like the boomers, there were situations where they were misunderstood because they were the ones that grew the population. Like, it was like 1 point something billion people in the world, and they tripled it in one generation. I'm pretty sure everyone was like, look at these guys. The old ones were looking down at them, and yet we're seeing, we have the Karens of the world in the boomer generation who are playing us around. And I think that's such a difficult thing to understand because there will be a moment when we have a new generation.
100%.
So I was having this conversation. Some of you will know Lester, our youth pastor, runs youth in our church. And we were having a conversation because we've grown up being in youth together, being youth leaders, getting out, going to Bible college, we've both been youth pastors in different categories. He's now our youth pastor here. And he's had conversations with me because I am now out of that space going, Danks, you don't understand. I'm now working in a space where I don't understand them. I used to be like alongside, it was peers. We 100%. All got our kind of idea. Then we were like just that kind of 5 years ahead. And so there's still some connection and we're good. Now he's like, we're old. And I don't know what the heck to do with these guys. And so I just have to have a million conversations to actually understand. Like, how do you think? Why do you think that? How do you go? And I think that's where church actually needs to move to.
100%.
In terms of like, the only way you can bring understanding, the only way that I think you can get to that space in terms of like, hey, let's actually show love. And don't get me wrong. I think people do need to get corrected. In a godly way, be corrected through God's word, and only that, not in the whip or anything like you're talking about. But I think that always has to be done in the context of actually I understand and I know how to do that. And at the end of the day, I actually have a best intention in mind. And so I think there's conversations that church needs to have.
Exactly.
To understand those things and to cross those gaps.
And I fully agree with you. I think one of the major and great roles that church plays and leaders in church do play is the accountability and helping correct people. But I think, like you say, that has to come with more than just, I'm only ever speaking to people who I've never met before in my life because I need to correct them, Because that's just not how, I guess it goes back to understanding younger generations. And maybe that was the way that things were dealt with in churches when the boomers were running things back then. But I think just as people evolve and I think also younger people are much more in touch with their feelings than older generations who weren't allowed to be or weren't able or given that space to be in touch with their feelings, So they didn't really need to care about their pastors having personal relationships with them. If he corrected me, well, he's the pastor. You've said it now, But I think understanding how younger generations think and feel creates better environments within the church in general,
Yeah. And I think, listen, on the back of COVID, I think everyone's in their fields right now, realizing that this is the space we walk into. Just in kind of like a post-COVID life. Well, I shouldn't say post. We're in the midst of it, but kind of knowing more now than we knew then.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you've seen, kind of industry-wise, but just on a personal level? What do you think the effects are? What do you think the pivots are? What do you think the changes are? What do you think some of the things that you've just seen from your perspective, from conversation spaces that you're in? How's this changing the world? But how's it changing Msizi?
Yeah, I think the world, Msizi too, it's a weird thing to say that COVID had any sort of blessing, but I think because it forced a lot of us to slow down in this rat race that is Johannesburg, it then allowed us to recalibrate and rethink about what we want to do. And I think that happened to me. You know, I think I was so much on the go before COVID. I was DJing five places a weekend and then working at this and that. I was always on the go that I didn't have any time to think about what I really want to do, you know, and really passionate about and really living, you know. So once again, I understand that that's not everyone's position. I was in a very fortunate position during COVID that my main primary job was never affected. Radio didn't go off air because of COVID, you know what I'm saying? So that job security stayed. But then I was also, because I wasn't doing a million different things outside, I was able to then sit down and think about, I mean, my business started during mid-COVID. You know, I started 2 businesses during COVID. So for me, it's like, it gave me the time, bless you, the time to really regroup. And I think a lot of my friends the same way. I think a lot of friends of mine who always were passionate about something, but could never pursue it because they had to go to the 9 to 5. Then when the 9 to 5 was taken away from them, sadly, because of retrenchments or whatever, it really got them stuck into what they were passionate about all along. And I saw friends who wanted to be graphic designers but were accountants, then pivot. Well, accountant's the bad one because accountant stayed. But that type of thing, where we worked at corporate and then your corporate closed and you were able to pivot because necessity required it, you know? So I've seen a lot of positive stories in that sense. I think same thing for me. It's taken me out of a place that I guess I was doing because I was good at it and I was making money of it to something that's probably more wholesome. So by that I'm referring to DJing, you know? So it took me from a place where I was DJing a lot to, this thing's actually draining. This thing of being out until the early hours of the morning. And I mean, I'm good, but that's never been my first love. I've never claimed to be this great, I'm not DJ PH or Black Coffee, you know what I'm saying? So it helped me then lean more into my passions, you know, which are people, which is, of course, the coffee industry and being able to expand that network of things, you know, even the app that we have, you know, just working on certain things that I otherwise didn't have the time to do.
Tell us more about that. Like, so in terms of like future and what the next while looks like, what's exciting you?
Is this live now?
No,
When will it go out? Because it depends what I can tell you.
only after next week.
After next week. Do you promise?
Promise.
So,
This stays in this. We will like this stays here.
when we leave, we're all signing NDAs. I'm just joking. No, I was saying to Dunks earlier on that it is this month is going to be the most exciting month of my whole life. The most changes I've ever done are going to happen. So already we've talked about the coffee shops, which have to be open within the next month. But then, as I said earlier on, this Friday is my last show at 5 FM. I've left the station and I'm moving to 947. So, it was just perfect timing, transfer season, and to the winner goes the spoils, as I say. They had the highest bid, and I took their offer, and for me, it made sense. I'm in Johannesburg, the hub of radio and entertainment, and my businesses are here. So for me, it made sense to leverage off the size of 947 here. And so as of the 23rd of March, I'll be doing the same time slot now, which is mornings 9 to 12, so brunch. And then the biggest change is as of next week, Tuesday, I'll be engaged, you know?
Hey.
So going away to propose. So it's just a lot of things within this month that will then change my future, you know? So it's going to be an interesting time. Please do not release this video, eh? Just joking. So
that's just a secret for us. We'll keep that one.
Yeah. So,
Before we get to questions, just one last thing. If you just do like any sort of encouragement challenge, I'm not going to give you anything, but just to the guys in the room, sitting in, like, we've had a bit of a conversation, we've chatted about a lot of things, but just for anyone sitting here who is looking into all these things about passions, things about purpose, things about kind of finding the balance, things about trying to work in spaces where sometimes being a Christian is difficult, having conversations with God, whether that's stuff in terms of, you know, those moments when you're just alone, crying out to God, going, God, I don't know what this looks like. If you're sitting in the place where it looks like the dreams are all shattered, or you're sitting in the place where like there's a lot of stuff on the front, where, you know, it's going to be the most exciting month of my life, wherever you are. But what would you say? I know this is a difficult one, but I'm setting you up for something good.
I think the first thing I would say is relationships matter, man. I think relationships in general matter. So be it with friends, your partner, your family, your pastor, I think they're so important. So getting those right. I think you can't do much in life or go far without sorting out relationships. I think one of the things that held me back was always sliding things under the carpet and just moving on from hurt or whatever it is. So I think one thing to set yourself free, just emotionally, I might be speaking from a personal level, but I think I'm not the only one who's gone through a lot of, be it trauma with personal relationships. Sort those out, you know, in whatever way. Go speak to people, sort them out, because your heart will feel much better and then allow you to move on with what you're meant to be doing. You know, I think when you are, once again, might be super personal. You might be sitting there thinking, what the heck is this guy talking about? But for me, I think what held me back a lot was not dealing with a lot of things in my past. Mm-hmm. And I think once I was able to close those chapters or reconcile with people in my life, I was able to, in a focused way, move on and start building a future. So fix your relationships is the first thing I say to most people. Just whatever was going on, fix them. And that doesn't mean become friends with people that you had to let go. Just fix them. Fix your relationships. And then it goes back to what we were saying. Make sure that when we're making plans, it's part of God's plan for you. And that doesn't mean sit back and just wait for God to reveal his plan. You don't lie in bed and think, well, the plan's going to hit me any moment now, you know? So work at whatever it is that you're trying to achieve or that you're passionate about or you want to do, but make sure that you involve him in that. There's only so far that we can go on our own accord and by our own power and will. So I think involve him in that every day, whatever steps you're making, especially major life decisions, be it engagement or just changing jobs, make sure that you're not doing it just for for monetary reasons. You know, make sure that this is his plan, because then that way things work out. You know, you might get the best job offer ever, but if it's not part of his plan for your life, it might end up being a nightmare of a job, regardless of how good the money or perks are of working there. So even with the whole 947 thing, that took me maybe 2 months to decide from the initial offer, just because I was like, Msizi, are you doing this for the wrong reasons? You still have such a long time or a lot of things to do at 5FM. Why are you moving? You know, took a lot of prayer and talking to my mom. You know, that's a big one too. A lot of consultation with my mom and God. You know, I mean, God first, then my mom. But I think, with big decisions, life-changing decisions, pray about it, and not just in passing. Don't mention it. When I say pray, I don't mean while you're doing grace. Lord Jesus, thank you for this food, but also let me know about the job. You know, have proper devotion and prayer about life-changing decisions. Your partners too. And I think one last thing, I said a bit early on, your circle is so important, man. The people you surround yourself is so important. And I think one thing that we must shy away from, and I will say it on radio, is don't surround yourself with agreeable people. You know, don't surround yourself in an echo chamber. That's also a big problem with people, is how they live in these echo chambers of just, this is what we... And that's not a Christian thing. It's not like you have to have non-Christian friends, which is cool if you do, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying our way of thinking and processing life. You know, you can't be stuck in this echo chamber of, this is what we think, and everyone outside of us is bigoted, because I see that as a big problem from where I'm from, in Hillcrest. A lot of my friends stuck around town, and then they all meet at the keg, and they argue about the same things, and it's just like, please make sure that you are not just surrounded by agreeable people. In your circles too, just keep your circles close-knit and tight. But yeah, I'll take questions and I'll answer whatever people want to know on top of that. But yeah, your circles, your relationships, and just getting proper affirmation from God about whatever plans, I'm willing to take no. You know, there's many times I've taken no for an answer because it just wasn't meant for me. Even career-wise, I've been offered jobs before where I was just like, this is very self-serving, but it adds no value, or like it's not a blessing from God. You know what I'm saying? Not every cool thing that pops up is necessarily a blessing. You know, it might lead down the wrong path, and I've seen it happen to me a lot. You know,
Yeah.
be it gigs or certain shows that I play or TV work where I'm just like, nah, I don't think that's for me.
Yeah.
You know.
So,
Yeah.
we're gonna go to questions. If someone's got a question, quickly raise your hand, and then just make sure Jeff gets a mic to you. You can ask your question. I think Collins has first.
Hello, can you hear me?
It's on.
It's on, bro.
I'm with that.
It's just for the record. Don't stress.
That's cool. That's cool. Okay, I'll still speak into it nonetheless. Thank you so much for coming through tonight.
Pleasure, my
And
brother.
thank you as well, thanks. I just wanted to ask, in terms of like the stuff that you're doing, because you're doing like a lot of business stuff, which I think is really, really cool. So how do you reconcile the aspects of your faith and your hustle in that sense? Because with the multiple businesses you're having, some churches and some people look at that and be like, but no, you should like be content, and like, you know, godliness with contentment is great gain and so forth. But some other people look at that and be like, yay, you know, you're being fruitful and like growing like as a tree like you're supposed to, like planted by rivers. So how do you navigate that tension between those two ideologies?
Such a good question about contentment too. It's like, why would you keep pursuing more and more? And I think with all my businesses, going back to how I definitely think a lot of them have been almost placed in my lap by God. I don't think I've ever done any business where I went and chased it and was like, this is not enough, I need to start something else. Even with the more coffee shops, I got a phone call out of the blue from somebody who doesn't know me and asked me to open these things, you know? So I'm saying that's not a me thing. This person doesn't know me. They got my number from somebody else, you know? So I really do believe, yeah, you should be content. What's the white word?
Content.
That one, right there. But at the same time, I do not think that being a great businessman stops you from following. I mean, there are many are businessmen and millionaires and maybe even some billionaires who are proper Jesus followers. So once again, I think every blessing, it comes from God. Every good blessing comes from God, man. And it's, I guess, yeah, being able to distinguish that, and that goes back to praying about every decision. When the guy called me about the new coffee shops, I didn't on the phone say, yes, let's do it. He gave me some time to think about it and pray about it, you know? So, yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, my brother.
Any other questions? Let me wipe it down, dude.
Front row, man. Front row.
So I have two, but I'll ask my first one building off of his.
Perfect.
So with the modern day, we have this real hustle culture, right? And especially you have millennials and Zoomers are now working record hours in order to sustain minimal living. You know, I have friends in the US, they're working 3 jobs so they can pay rent at the end of the month. And the fact is that that's just what a capitalist society demands of us, that you work harder, you produce more money for the man up top, and you get your little share. How do you just sort of avoid getting so discouraged by that?
Such a good question. And I said it a while ago to somebody where I don't know where this hustle mentality or concept came from. I think it's so destructive. The idea that, yo, I'm a hustler as your title, I think is such a bad one, only because hustling means you're never succeeding at things. So if you're always hustling, that means nothing is working out for you. What are you doing wrong? Are you pursuing your own agenda and not God's agenda then, or plan for your life? Because I don't think God's intention for us is to hustle. Once again, because of the idea, the mentality of hustling is that it's never worked out. Jay-Z is not a hustler, you know what I'm saying? Maybe he was when he was younger, but that man is not a hustler now. He's a billionaire, you know what I'm saying? So I don't think that always trying to, and you're right, it absolutely sucks. You move to the UK or America, and just to afford rent in New York City, you need more than one job. And it's like, I don't think that's what we're meant to be doing. I don't think our nature is meant to be, or our lives are meant to be consumed by work like that, you know? So as cheesy as it sounds, I always say to people, I never work harder. I just try my best to work smarter. And I surround myself with people who do the same. So with my businesses or whatever ventures I'm involved, I'm not the only one. I'm not staying, you'll never hear me talking about burning the midnight oil. I've always said I'm not outworking anyone, you know? I've been out, I always say to people, blessed, black, and highly favored. I don't know why, but I've just been mad blessed in what I've done, and God's favor's been in my life. So I do not encourage people to always be working or always trying to grind to the next thing. I do think sleep is important, and I took a nap before I came here, so I think it's mad important. So yeah, it's just not I don't think that's what as people or humans we're meant to be doing, working 3 jobs, Once again, I'm mad lucky. I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you and say that I am incredibly busy every day, which sometimes I am. So I'll get a day like yesterday, which I was on the go the whole day, but then I'll get a day like tomorrow where I know at 12 o'clock I'm going to take a nap. You know what I'm saying? And it has been a matter of I've got a great enough amount of people or team around me that helps alleviate that. Everyone plays their role. And my role as boss or whatever is being helped and reduced because I still have a life to live. I've got a fiance as of next week. I've got dogs that I need to look after. I've got friends that I need to entertain. So that work-life balance and church and everything else is finding that balance is mad important. And I know it sounds mad naive of me to say when I'm in the position that I am, but I can only speak from my experience. I can't speak for other people or what they have to go through, So I can only tell my life story. Yeah.
I don't want to. I'll jump in on something.
Yeah.
I don't want to I don't want to be the super pastor on this. I think I mean I've heard this and I've had this conversation with so many people who are sitting in that space going, "This is how I see it." I'm like, and it's exactly what you're saying. Like you're in that grind, and it's just not. And like, is this even worth it in terms of like how does it play out? And I'm going to say this very as nice as I possibly can. I think sometimes when we look at something like that, and this is the thing, people don't think that people in ministry have this. The problem is you can have that exact same feeling being a pastor in ministry. And I know that's crazy. Like people think we just like somehow work and, we work on like the living water and it does you can, like this thing can become that job that you're grinding away at and you're going, why am I doing this? Like we're not immune from it because now we're working at church or, my salary comes from city. It so often comes back to how we view and the lens we're looking through. And I think the world has looked at this idea and gone, I have to make it myself. I'm going to get mine. It's a lens, it's a view, it's a worldview, and the truth is, it is not a godly worldview. God gives us a lens where we look at the exact situation. We can be in the exact thing, doing the 3 jobs, hustling to get our family food on the table, and go home happy as Larry, full of joy. And you go, how? How is that even possible? Because there are people in the world who are like that, who their whole life, then they others would look at them and go, they're not blessed. They're not finding, living in it and things are just happening. They grind from day one until the last day on earth. They sweat, there's blood and tears. And yet they get into the end of their life going, you know what, God was just faithful through everything. And you go, how the heck how do you say that? How do you, like looking at that, I don't believe you. Because you had your house like repossessed and your car repossessed and you got retrenched, you haven't had work in through it. How do you still say it? It's the lens. And so for me, I'm like, God gives us a view that is very different to that. And so God's view is going to be very different to like a hustle culture. God's view is going to, and I mean, there's principles within God's word that, there's going to be some people who, parable of the talents, like there are people who get given 10 and you better use 10. And so there'll be people who burn the midnight oil, and absolutely to give God glory, you need to burn the midnight oil. There's a way to do that and do it wrong. But then there's some people who maybe only have 1. But then the question is, are you burying it or using it as God had called you to? And like that's where that's where the principles for me start to change. And I know that's not exact, like it's a very pastory answer. I hope you hear what I'm saying. But for me, it's all about the lens of it. Like, and that's where I look at people and they struggle, and I just go, if only we could get God's view on this. If only we could have our lens be changed out for the world's lens and given his lens. So that we're looking at the world through his gospel, through his truth, through his perspective. Because then work is something that doesn't end. Like work is something that's eternal. mission will end, evangelism will end, worship won't. Do it all in eternity. Work won't. We'll do it all in eternity. Like, it's an important thing to understand, but like, what's our view of it? I hope that helped.
Yeah, not everything is for everyone, man. What was the second question?
Oh yeah.
So my second question is then a lot more political and coming also from somebody who's in the entertainment industry, but I'm hoping it'll help majority of people here. Our industry nowadays tends to be very leftist in terms of its politics. So you have very liberal worldviews. And some of those obviously clash to some degree with Christian morals. And for myself personally, for example, the biggest problem I've run into is like with LGBTQ, and especially with like the trans movement, which is like, how do you actually address that? As well as just like the overall political views nowadays of just like liberalism. The conservatives, they're the old white guys who hate everybody and they're racist, and then there's the enlightened people over here. And how do you just sort of hold your Christian values there, while also not, being the old the old racist white guy over in the corner?
Oh, you came in hot and heavy tonight, eh, my friend?
He baited us with the first
not
question.
Roger good, you know what I'm saying?
And then was like, but my real question.
What do you do, just out of interest?
I'm an animator.
Animator. That's very cool. See how this industry is so big and so like, so many different talents. I can't even draw like a stick figure. It's wild.
Some animators aren't able to draw. I know one, he can't draw a stick man, but mad animation.
Wow.
Mad. But anyway, Karen.
Whew.
I'll let you start, because this is...
What a good question.
I'll see where you go.
I think the first, how do I deal with it? I don't, I guess. I don't let the world influence me. I always look at it through the lens of I influence the world, So for me, it's very much, I'm in a very lucky situation where I have my own show. So it's not somebody else's views that I have to sit there and agree with, or I'm not fed information that I then spew out. I'm not a news reporter, you know what I'm saying? So for me, I only speak about things that I see, believe, and agree with, you know what I'm saying? I also, once again, going back to surrounding yourself with the people who are agreeable, I don't surround myself with people who are agreeable. I know my circle of people. Once again, my circle is mad important, and our core values and beliefs are the same as mine. I'm always willing to engage in arguments and conversations, but I don't think it's my place to have an opinion on all those things yet. Maybe one day when I am now 10 years in the game or 15 years in the game and I'm working at 702 SAFM, a current affairs show, and they're like, yo, what is your belief in this? Maybe then I'll answer, but I guess that's never become an issue for me because I work at a music station. I just play music, banter, jokes, and I guess I've genuinely never been put in a situation where I've got to give my opinion and views on that for the media or the public consumption. Back to you. Sure, I got out of that one so well.
I think so. I think that was like... You're much more experienced at how to dodge and lead.
100%.
Listen, I think... So again, I can't speak in the space because I'm not working in a corporate space. I'm not necessarily working in an industry like you are. But where that balance or that conflict might arise is very often I have to stand on that stage and potentially say something that there'll be people in the room, people online, wouldn't agree with or wouldn't like at all. That when we put it out and it goes on Facebook and YouTube, potentially it could have a lot of blowback and kind of backlash. And so I've stood on that stage and spoken about things like this, whether it's, here's a biblical view in terms of homosexuality, here's a biblical view on marriage, here's a biblical view on sex before marriage. Like, things that I understand in our culture and our society and the space we find ourselves in probably is not going to land very nicely. And there will be those, and have been those, who, to be fair, I don't have to deal with it as much as I've seen other mates of mine in different churches and different kind of platforms. But I think the thing that I've always done, and I think it's something that even we've done well in this church in terms of how we go about it, is understanding that, because I think so there's two mistakes here. One, there's the one side of church which will just blast you with the truth and absolutely not meet you in the space. And then the other side is like, let's just not talk about that at all, or let's actually, and not actually help anyone in terms of actually this is what God has to say about this thing. And the thing is, God does have a lot to say about our identity. God does have a lot to say about sexuality. God does have a lot to say about what we do with what do they say? It's no, I don't want to say it. It's like, it's super old school, like Sunday school, but I won't go there. And I think I'm the one who always talks about the tension or the balance. To say at the end of the day, I'm going to give you not Duncan's opinion on this thing. I'm going to give you what God's word says about it. But at the same time, I'm not going to be the one that stands on a high horse and says, you know, this is how you need to change, or this is what it is. But at the same time, God says this. And so we're going to have that kind of a conversation. And I think the one thing I've always appreciated, and I think people appreciate it, is like when you don't compromise on what the truth is, but simultaneously say it with genuine care for the person, you generally find that balance and it comes out right, no matter how it works. I mean, so I remember we were getting into a part specific. I think we were it was 2 years ago when we were in Exodus, and it was hitting into something really deep in terms of marriage, and it was hitting something really deep in terms of like touching on sexuality kind of stuff. And there's a couple that I know who literally come every single week, and they're a gay couple and are married. But literally, if you had to ask them what their church is, they would tell you that it's this one. And I had to almost, throughout that whole week, prep this preach, realizing like, I know that they're going to be sitting there. But the bigger picture for me was, I also know God's going to be watching this message. And so for me, I sat in that balance for a week, really like trying to wrestle it. And at the end of the day, those people are still in our church. And I think it's because you have to find this balance of like, God has something to say and he will say it. But at the same time, God meets us in it. Like God met me in my mess. God met me with his truth in the things that will offend me. So I'm not going to get worried when it offends someone else, as long as I know what my heart is in bringing that. And I think people generally will respect that. Because so often it's not like the turn or burn, let's throw it out. It's not, but it's also not like I'm just not going to talk about it, or I'm just going to kind of pander to whatever it's saying, because then it changes his value system. It starts to like get into compromise, which it's that space of like, my heart is for you, and my heart is so for you and so for God that I still will say this, but I'm going to say it in this way. Because at the end of the day, I think what the problem is, we let people dictate to us how we should say things or how we go. At the end of the day, we are the ones who have control over that. No one has control over that. And so we can say it. And we don't need to say like Donald Trump. And we also don't need to go and be Oprah. We can find our voice. And I think that's where God kind of, he gives us that voice. And it comes from that heart that's kind of gone through him, but at the same time, holding the truth in our hand that we know, okay, this is where it goes. And so I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of where
the art to life is balance. So I think absolutely that what you just said is so poignant, because you do need to find that balance, you know, from not compromising on what your beliefs are and what the truth actually is, and also not just saying things because you want to Bible bash people and you just want to stand on your high horse, you know what I'm saying? So even the way that you say things and the way that you approach things, and what goes back to what I was saying about the church, the personal relationships with people, you know? So I think going back to pastors, I'm not talking about you, I've never been here, but like I can't, it's probably the wrong approach for a pastor to sit on a stage and just preach at you about turning or burning or homosexuality if you've never had even a conversation about who you are with this pastor, you know what I'm saying? And I don't think the pastor should be friends with everyone in the church, but it's just like leadership in general. I think when it comes to dealing with those type of issues that arise in the church and elsewhere. But yeah, it's balance, man. It really is a really important balance. Like you said, it's probably the wrong approach to approach it like Donald Trump, but then whoever the complete opposite of Don Lemon, That's what I could think of. Probably the wrong approach to approach it like him too. So striking a balance is mad important.
Now everyone's scared to give a question, isn't it?
You keep mentioning your app. I just want to know what's your app.
So I started an app called Instagram. I'm just joking. Then they bought it. I'm a billionaire. No, so we have an app called Howya. Not Howla, Howya. And it's a social app, man. It will come out end of next month. So we've been working on it for over 2 years now. But the beta version's available, so you can test it out. And basically, it's an app that, imagine if you moved to Cape Town. If anyone's ever lived in Cape Town, you'll know that it's one of the hardest cities to make friends. Move to Cape Town, you're on this app, and all the cool things happening around you, but it's user generated. So all the cool things happening around you will be on this app. So I've just moved to Sea Point. I put my location within 10 kilometers, and it says, yo, Monica's going hiking and she wants 3 other people to join her, you know? Or happened to me the other day, you're sitting at home, a friend of mine calls me and goes, yo, Msizi, we're going to play cricket this Sunday. It was Sunday. He said, we're going to play cricket today. One of our guys just pulled out, do you know how to play cricket? Come play. I was like, cricket? I know how to drink when I'm watching cricket, but not play. So exactly. So cool. We need one more batter to come play cricket at this such and such place. So social like that for older, and it's, what I like is that it's older and younger. So if you are an older person and you want to go do a
Bridge.
a wine tasting.
No,
somewhere.
bridge. Bro, the cars. I thought you were going super old.
Bro, you said bridge, and you said you're also 30. I'm very confused about everything now. But yeah, I want to play bridge, or I want to have a wine night with people, either at a restaurant or at my house or whatever it may be. Then, of course, security reasons, you can approve. You know, you can approve and disapprove who joins or whatever it is. So, this app, it's called Howya. Like, how are ya, but just Howya. Check it out on Instagram. It's got a good page there.
So you've already touched on a couple, what I would call sort of like false stories people tell themselves, or false beliefs that people have. And your first one was talking about the idea of like hustling is the goal. Like that's what we tell ourselves. So my question is, as young people, what are some of the other false stories that we seem to be telling ourselves, or false narratives that we are buying into as a generation that you think are actually going to be toxic to us? And then how do we ultimately choose to resist those and buy into something that's actually true and actually beneficial?
Ooh. Wow. Do you want to go first?
No.
Okay. So things that we tell ourselves as young people that aren't true, really. You know? Sure.
I'll give you one. That likes and views are real. I think that's a lie that we buy into. And I'll be very honest here. Church in COVID moving online, church has fell for this. So like I see churches. So I have a dream where like if I had to do a website or a blog, or like if I just had to not care, I do something called Why Church, and I just put churches on blast. But that's just for me and my keeping it. But I think, so I'll just talk about church first, but then I think it's actually a bigger issue. Churches will put out like, cool, church online, we have this many views, we have whatever. But it's always done based on like, you forget that the real thing, and I mean, I spoke about this on Vision Sunday actually, like you forget that the views actually have people behind it. But it doesn't necessarily, but we all know kind of how the algorithms work and how it all goes. What is the real person behind that thing, behind that like, behind that comment, behind that, you know, like how do we gauge it? And so many churches have just looked at it face value. This is what it is. We're doing amazing online because we have this many subscribers, or we have had this many people like watching Sunday. But I think we have not, we forgot that we need to cross that line in terms of like, how many lives are we connecting with? Because that's all that's all church is. Church is literally like, we connect God and people, and that's it. Like, that's actually all we do when you take it right down to what church is. Like, it's where the manifold wisdom of God gets shared. It's where community gets built. It's how God decided that we should do this thing. And so that connection matters. I get that in the online space, we all didn't know really how to do it. Like, there were some churches that did, others. I mean, your grand church down the road had to get a Facebook page, which they never had, and probably never would have ever. But suddenly COVID made it happen. And so there'll be pros to that. But I think we've missed the side of, like, we've just looked at the face value and we've forgotten that there's face behind it. Society-wise, I mean, we understand the comparison game, especially, I'm not picking on you guys, but ladies in the room. When you're on social media and you're watching that girl living her best life, and it's that comparison game of look how many likes she got, or look where she is. She's in the Winelands. She's doing the, like, and we do it too. Guys do it, we just do it quietly.
Look how many abs he has, this one, eh?
And we suddenly, so we then assign value to those things. And so we assign value to those likes, and we assign value to those filters, and we assign a value. And we forget actually, and this is what I mean, like, you know, we've had things like the social dilemma. You have all these kind of Instagrammers, YouTubers, TikTokers, all of them coming out going, I am absolutely broken because all I do is just think of, I'm trying to put content out, I'm trying to get engagement, I'm trying to do this, and they're living their own rat race to the point where they're all burning out and getting like complete mental breakdowns. And I think it's because we've missed this thing and we bought into the lie that the like matters, and we think that the like has value. It doesn't. Like, connection matters, and connection has value.
Absolutely.
And that's where, I mean, even, you know, the business of Instagram and YouTube and all these guys is like, well, you have to connect with your audience in order to monetize. And so even the money is telling you that. But we look at the face value. We look at likes, we look at thumbs up, and we look at star ratings, and we look at this, and engagements and comments and shares, and we look at these. But it's like, just focus on connection. And that's where I think we've left. And I think that's also what COVID's exposed, is like, we don't realize the power connection has, because we've only realized it being so disconnected. And our intense need for connection has been lost. And so I think that's a lie we've bought into.
Stop trying to keep up with literally the Joneses and Kardashians, man. Social media will ruin your life in weird ways. I think I always tell the story that I once bought a car for Instagram, you know, just so I could get all the likes on Instagram. Almost ruined my whole credit rating. But just, live within your means. But I think another one, completely different, not quite as deep. I think we do live in a generation of hypersensitivity and hyper offended. And I always said on air, and I'll say it in general, just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right, you know? So while you have the right to be offended, doesn't mean you're right about it, you know? And the truth doesn't care about your feelings, as weird as that sounds. So that's one thing. I think we've told ourselves that our feelings matter more than the truth, and our opinions really do matter. And it's like, no, not everyone's opinion matters. You're allowed to voice it, but it doesn't matter. And also, like I said, just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right, man. And yeah.
Any other questions?
Hi.
Hello.
My question goes back to careers, passions, and the like. So you did mention that you did change a lot, and a lot of things happened. I feel like I'm at a stage in my life where I feel stuck. I feel like I want to be here, but I'm here. And obviously there's a lot of opinion. People will tell you do this, other people will be like, do that. And it's confusing. You know how you feel inside, but where do I go? I feel stuck. So I feel as though I know what I want. I know what I feel will make me happy in the future. However, where I am, it doesn't seem like I'm going in that direction, but that is the opportunity that I have right now. And it feels like there's no other door that's opening where I want to be or where I feel like I want. And you did mention, like, there's God's plan and there's my plan. So in this moment where I feel stuck, right, life goes on, right? I have to wait for God to talk to me. He might be talking to me. It might feel like he's not, but I feel like I'm stuck. In that moment, before everything happens or before I get that, like, this is what God is doing, how do I move on? How do I muster up the passion or the energy to continue what I feel like I'm doing is not for me, but I need to keep going? I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah, like how do you move on from being stuck or feeling stuck in this process? Yeah.
Such a good question. I'd never thought I'd be giving anyone business advice, firstly. You know? I am not the person. But
To
no,
be, the answer I think you're going to give is ask your mom to ask God.
yeah, speak to your mom first. I'm joking. But I think with a lot of jobs and careers that we think are our career, but jobs, maybe where you are at the moment is just a stepping stone to where you're meant to be. So changing your mentality. If you can't change your situation, change your perception on that situation. And I know that's easier said than done. I know you could have read that quote somewhere else, but I think it's so important. I've worked at places where I thought, my goodness, I am stuck, like you're saying. I need this income to, I guess, pay the bills or pay for my family, whatever it may be. But this is not my purpose. I'm not meant to be here. You know, so I think it is. While you're in the process of praying and waiting for God's answer and maybe a revelation about what you're meant to be doing in the greater scheme of things, maybe change from thinking that this is where you are now to I'm on this journey, you know, and this is just one part of it. So while I'm in this horrible job that I don't like, it's not forever, but it's just, I know it's so hard to, I guess, do in practicality. It's easier said than done, but to more think about it as a stepping stone. You know, this job is for the now, while I prep for whatever I'm meant to be doing next. And I think even with whatever it is that you want to do, the thing that you're passionate about, work towards that, I guess, and see how you can incorporate that already into your life and see what doors the Lord opens. Because once again, like I said a bit earlier on, I don't think the Lord just goes, cool, well, here it is now. You know, I think hard work is still important, working towards your goals, and the Lord coming at the same time and making sure that whatever you're doing is fruitful and prosperous is mad important. So I can imagine, because I've been in a position where I've worked at places where I'm like, I'm not meant to be here. This is not for me. But I was very quick in the process also thinking, well, I'm not meant to be here, but I'm here now. Let me make the most of it. And also, it's not forever. You know, so that's the best advice I can give. Yeah.
I think that space of being stuck, it's almost like you're caught between God's timing and God's will. And you're in that space where you're like, I don't know what to do with that. I think something that's so important is to, if you look at God's word, there's a principle that comes right through scripture, and it's the principle of seasons. And so there's times for planting, times, and he comes right back to, like, God's a good farmer. Like, that's his thing. But so often our first mistake is we don't realize what season we're in, or we've misdiagnosed or misunderstood what season we're in. And so while we're trying to jump to the next, it's like, no, but there's still some work to be done here. You haven't finished planting, for example. So I think a first great question, because I don't know all the details of your situation, but I think a good question to be asking is, well, what season am I in? Because when you understand what season you're in, then you know what tool to use. And so, like, how God always works in terms of, like, people say, like, how the heck do I know what God's will is? How do I get what he's saying? Like, God has only given us a few things to actually be able to know his will. He's given us his word, he's given us his spirit, and he's given us wise counsel. And that's what comes into your whole, everyone's got an opinion. Opinion's great, but we don't move on opinion. And so, like, we'll move on God's word. And so diving deep into his word is going to reveal truth. He's given you his spirit, so his spirit actually does speak to us, whether that's reading his word or even just in how he's speaking to us through worshiping him. And then he gives us wise counsel. And that's the way we sometimes can go wrong, because that's where we actually do move into the court of opinion somewhat. But actually it's like, how much value do we place on that person and their counsel? Because if it's easy. I say it's easy. You just define, if they're wise, their counsel is going to be good, because a wise counsel is going to point you back to God, and it's going to be in line with his spirit. Easy game. And so it's so important to have those three things lined up, because when you get that space, then suddenly the timing thing's less of the problem. It might not move it. You might have to, God's like, not yet. which is not nice to hear. Like, I've been in those seasons where it's not yet. But at least it's given you the context of like, I know what season I'm in, I know what tool I'm using, and at the end of the day, I'm actually seeking God on it. I don't know all the details, but I hope that was helpful. I think we'll do one or two more, and then we'll, yeah. Anyone else?
Is there no one else?
I've got a question.
Jeff's got the final question. Jeff's been holding out.
So, Msizi, I can see that you are somewhat an outspoken individual.
Somewhat.
Somewhat. And I can see that's a little bit easier for you to share your opinion, just no matter where you are, just because you're like, okay, if that's not sticking with my values, I'm going to speak up. What encouragement can you give to someone that's struggling to speak up of their beliefs, their core values, even if they believe in or might not be that much outspoken in their situation? Because you're already in like a pretty intense industry, the entertainment industry, which already is super difficult, and you're already doing so well in being outspoken. But like, what about someone who might be in the same situation or might be in a different workspace where they're also struggling to speak up and share their values and they love Jesus, but it's not really being shown because they're scared to speak up?
So, and you're talking about in a work situation?
It could be work or even just friend situation.
Yeah.
Maybe you've grown up with people that you're best friends, and maybe you ended up falling in love with Jesus, like
And
when
they
you
didn't.
and they didn't, and now you're still best friends with them, but they're far, and you're like, I don't want to be part of that, but I love you guys, but I'm too scared to speak up.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I think once again, like you said, I am mad outspoken. So I think sharing my opinion is something that comes naturally to me, even when I'm wrong, and even when no one wants to hear my opinion. Give it regardless. And I think, and I acknowledge that that's not everyone, and it doesn't have to be everyone. I don't think my advice was don't do it if it's not part of your character. And by that, I'm not saying don't ever tell people, but you don't have to go stand in front of the boardroom and say, yo, Jesus is great. But I guess for that type of person, it is much more of a personal thing, you know what I'm saying? And when I say personal, I mean with the people closest to them or in their circle. So I can imagine that there are people in their workplace who have, even if you've recently found the Lord and you were never a Christian and now you're all of a sudden a Christian, it's hard for you to speak up if you're not somebody who speaks up. But it's like, what do you mean speak up? Because I guess my actions will speak louder than my words, especially if it's a group of friends that I used to party and drink with all the time. When I start pulling myself away and they see the change in my life, which is, I guess, what happens in lots of our lives as we change and go down the straight and narrow, as they say. Like, I think about myself, and when I said 2014, 2015, when I was wild, that group of friends noticed the change and shift in my life when I found Jesus again and I started following Jesus again. They noticed that, and I guess questions come. Yo, Msizi, why weren't you out last Friday? You know? Yo, Msizi, I haven't seen you out in a while. And that's more of a personal relationship thing where they've come and asked me. I didn't put up a status and say, yo, no longer going out. Found the Lord, cheers, bye. Never gonna come for a drink with you guys. And I think also what really is important is not acting holier than thou and above and like beyond reproach, you know what I'm saying? This thing of a lot of Christians, and I guess maybe I was there at some stage, where as soon as you have found the Lord or of going through a change in your life, you all of a sudden at this high horse of I'm much better than you people. You know, I think what really puts people off Christianity and religion as a whole is often the people, you know? So, yeah, I don't know if I answered a single thing you asked me there, but I guess the simple answer is that we're not all built the same. So I think we approach situations differently, and maybe your way of speaking out or telling people about God is much more of a quiet way than I do it. As long as you're still getting the message out, then people are able to see through you that you are a changed person, good and faithful servant, as they say. It's good enough. We're not all meant to be pastors, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's what I think. Do you look at Duncan when I said we're all not meant to be pastors? Eh?
It's because Jeff said he would never be on a church staff. He said that once. And now look at you. Guys, can we thank Msizi?
No, thank you guys. This is really cool. It's really cool. First time in a while that I've been out at night, firstly.
Hey.
And this is really cool, man. You guys are a cool group
This
of
is why
people.
you do mid-morning shows.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're gonna wrap it up now. I'm keen for us to pray for Msizi.
That would be amazing.
And then we'll be done. You don't need to rush off if you want to carry on chat. We do still have stuff to finish over this side. And thank you so much for coming.
And yeah, please move your church closer to Parker's.
Yeah.
Cool, great. Thank you.
Or we just pray a blessing over the coffee shop to put petrol in your car to get
Exactly. And mileage for my car. Oh my goodness.
It's fine. The Lord has already told me I'm just gonna go after your fiance. And if we can get her,
Yeah, 100%. You've won. You've absolutely won.
done. Father God, I want to thank you so much. I want to thank you so much that you care. Lord, you care enough that you speak to a room full of people, people who you know intrinsically, you know deeply, you know the number of hairs on our head, that you care so much about the details of our lives, the cries of our heart, and you want to speak your life and your truth and your spirit into it. And Lord, it's really my prayer that whatever was spoken tonight just did what it needed to. That, Lord, if there was just a grain of truth, a grain of a message that you wanted to put into people's hearts tonight, that happened. I pray that we would have ears that hear you, even through something like just a black and a white guy sitting and chatting to each other. And Lord, I do want to thank you so much for Msizi. I want to thank you for what you have done, the story that you have told through his life. It's a story of just you moving him step by step. And it's the story of, Lord, you call us to walk through doors to get into our next season, to get into the purpose that you have set out for us. And the real story of Msizi's journey, even as we have heard tonight, is that he walks through doors of obedience. He doesn't walk through doors of opportunity. And Lord, it's so important, and I just really do pray for people in this room that we would be a people who walk through doors of obedience and not opportunity. That we would walk in step with your spirit. And I think it's just such a testimony of Msizi's life that he is putting up everything to your truth and to your spirit, and he will move based on that. Lord, I thank you so much for the spaces you've put him in. I thank you for how you have even in the past prophesied over him, and we've seen it come to fruition in what he's doing right now. Lord, we pray that as he is even now in this transition period, as he is working in the same space but moving to a new position, in a new place, with new people, in a new organization, Lord, we know that there sometimes can be a rub there. We know that there are practical things that need to come into line. And I just pray really for a massive blessing over that time. I pray for a massive blessing over Msizi as he steps into being engaged with the girl that you have put in his life, with the girl that you have placed and partnered together. Lord, you call us to partnership. You call us to do this thing, and the people that are around us are so important. I want to pray a blessing over their marriage. I want to pray a blessing over this month of just absolute crazy change. But Lord, it's stuff you have brought him through so many years to set up, and that the next phase, the next month, the next years will just be such a story and such a testimony of your love and your care for Msizi. Lord, I thank you so much that he has this open heart. I thank you that he has this heart that wants to share. I thank you for the boldness that we see in him, and I pray that it will be something that challenges us as we walk out into our spheres of influence, as we walk out into our families and friends. I pray that boldness is something that we would grab a hold of and we would carry out. Because, Lord, you call us to boldness. You call us to be your message carriers. You call us to be the ones who hold your grace and your mercy, and we are able to give it to others. I pray that in the next while Msizi would just go deeper with you. I pray that in his conversations with you, in his devotion to you, in his as he dives and studies your word, that Lord, you would just speak to him in a new way. That he would go next level in his intimacy and relationship with you, because everything will flow out of that. I thank you so much for what he has done here. Thank you so much for what he has shared. We so appreciate his heart. We so appreciate what you have done in his life. We so appreciate the testimony of your grace and mercy over him. And Lord, it has done much for us. And we pray that, Lord, this night would just be another moment where we got to meet with God. We got to chat together. We got to enjoy it. But ultimately, Lord, we give all glory to you. And so, Lord, I thank you so much for this time. I thank you so much for these conversations. And I pray you would do much with them. And everybody said, Amen.
Thank you so much. Awesome. Thank you so much.